Hi, my name's Kathy Oakes, and I'm going to be showing you today how to make a mask that we can wear for protection when we go out in this horrible scourge of COVID-19. I've been making these for both the cancer center and the hospital and a doctor's office here in Tennessee where we live. And so I'm going to show you how to make these masks. Forgive me if I am very elementary about it. I'm going to do step by step. My friend Carrie requested this video so that she could make them too. And she said, remember, I'm a newbie. So we're going to do it from step one so that, Carrie, when I finish, you'll be able to do this. The mask I'm making is made, first of all, of quilter's cotton. The CDC says that quilter's cotton is the best fabric to use. It's very tightly woven. It filters out about 75% of the air particles, and you're going to be breathing through 2 layers of it, as well as there's a little pocket in the side here where you can add an extra layer of protection, either Kleenex, paper towel, a piece of a disposable mask, whatever, that even increases its effectiveness. So it also has an adjustable nose piece that will adjust around the nose of the person so that if someone wears glasses, first of all, it closes in and makes it more effective, but if someone wears glasses and so forth, their mask doesn't, their glasses don't fog up from the mask. It has 2 pleats in it so that it expands, as you see, and fits well around the face, ties up here, ties back here, and this is the mask that our hospital and the cancer center are requesting. So I'm going to show you how to make this mask. We start out, I'm using fat quarters. Most fat quarters are made of quilter's cotton. So, and I had a collection of about 500 of them. And so they're easy use for me. I'm not going to cut it out because I already have one cut out here, and I'm just going to show you. What you're going to do is you're going to cut 7 inches of the width of your fabric. As you see, a fat quarter, anyone who quilts knows what a fat quarter is. It's a yard of fabric that's literally cut into fourths. So instead of ending up with 9 inches by the width of the fabric, you end up with about 22 inches wide and about 18 inches long. So you've got you have a whole lot more workspace with a fat quarter than you do with just a quarter of a yard of fabric. So anyway, I'm going to cut, as you see, 7 inches from my fat quarter by the width of the fabric, 18 inches. And this is my mask. I'm going to need about 108 inches of binding. This is the binding that turns into a tie. It makes the tie and the binding. It takes about 54 inches for each side, the top and the bottom. So I'm going to need about 108 inches of that. Because I'm using fat quarters, for me, I have to cut 6 of them. 6 strips, 1.5 inches wide, 1.5 inches wide by the width of your fabric. And I end up with 6 strips like this. I'm going to stitch those together and show you how to make the binding. What you will need to do this with, you don't have to have a quilter's cutting wheel. You can do it with scissors, regular scissors. As long as you end up, before you start your mask, you end up with a piece of fabric that is 7 inches by 18 inches and 2 pieces of 1.5 by 54 inch binding. As long as you end up with that, you're good to go. So I'm going to show you how to make the binding because the pattern that I have calls for bias tape. Good luck finding that. My husband actually found some at Walmart today, but it's more precious than gold right now. The only thing that's harder to find is elastic. So we're going to do our own so that all you need to make these is your fabric and thread and a sewing machine, and you're good to go. So let me show you how to make the binding for this mask. And I'm just going to put this fat quarter out of the way. And we're going to sit at the sewing machine and we're going to make this binding. As you see, I'm joining it right side to right side, and I'm going to stitch right here along this little short edge. And these are 18 inches, so if I join 3 of them together, I'm going to end up with 54 inches times 2 for my binding and tie. Here we go. Every seam you do in this process, you will need to backstitch at the beginning and the end of the seam. Very important, because you don't want your seams coming out. So, I'm going to do about a 1/4 inch seam for this. I'm going to backstitch at the beginning, backstitch at the end. And since I'm a quilter, I do chain piecing. So I'm just going to take this top piece, I'll put my 3rd piece on it, right side to right side, and off we go. Now, see those little stitches in between? That's what happens when you chain stitch. I'm going to clip those little stitches, and ta-da! You have one piece of 54 inch by 1.5 inch. I'm going to do my other piece because I'm going to show you how to use those on your mask as we go along. Where did my, oh. Clip my stitches, clip the tail ends of my thread, and we are good to go. Now we have our binding. We take it to the ironing board. Ignore my nasty ironing board with stains all over it. This poor ironing board has seen more quilt tops than I even care to mention. The seams that we just made, we're going to press open. So as you see, you're going to open the seam out like so and press it. The reason for that is when you're stitching your binding onto your mask, your needle has to go through fewer layers of fabric. So you're going to press it open, both seams. If you're doing a fat quarter, you will have 3 pieces. Now, here comes the important part. Because I'm making a straight binding rather than a bias binding is cut on the bias of the fabric. This is a straight binding. So, this is how we do it. On the long edge of your fabric, that whole 54 inches, you're going to turn under about a 1/4 inch. Any quilter can recognize a 1/4 inch from 50 yards away. You're going to turn under a 1/4 inch, and you're going to press it all the way down, like so. And I'm using a steam iron because it makes the seam stay in better. It holds it in better. It's also very hot. There's your one piece of binding. As you see, this is the wrong side, and I've turned under about a 1/4 inch and pressed it all the way down. Do the same thing with the second piece. Press your seams open. And this one doesn't want to open. Ooh, come on. All right, see, I've pulled that seam open. You'll press it. Same thing with my second seam. Pull it open and press it. Now I'm going to press my 1/4 of an inch all the way down one long edge of the fabric. All right, there we go. You have your binding. Now we're just going to take that over here and put it out of the way while we make the mask itself. Because, let me grab this one so we can look at it as we go. Because we're making the pocket in the mask, I'm going to show you how to do that. You're going to open your piece of fabric, 7 inches by 18 inches. And we're going to press a rolled hem on the short edge, both short edges of the fabric. We don't want to leave any open seams because these things can be put in the washer and the dryer. They can be sterilized, they can be sprayed with Lysol, whatever. But we don't want to leave any open seams that will fray when they go in the washer and the dryer. So we're just going to press under once again, about 1/4 of an inch. It's not rocket science. It doesn't have to be exact, but about 1/4 of an inch. That's a little less, but we're going to press that in. We're going to roll it over again on itself. This is called a rolled hem, and we're going to press it in again. Do exactly the same thing on the other end of the fabric, the other short end of the fabric. And yes, it gets hot. Very hot. Once again, a rolled hem on this end of the fabric. Now, because these are made with a pocket, ouch, burn your fingers. We're going to make that pocket now, and I'm going to show you how to do that. You see, it has 2 pleats in it. We're going to make those pleats and the pocket. With your fabric still open, you're going to fold it. Keep your rolled hems nice and straight there. You're going to fold it in about thirds. Doesn't have to be exact, but about that. About thirds. You see how I did that? I just folded it in about thirds. You're going to press it to get nice crisp edges. All right, we're going to take this back to the sewing table, and we're going to make the pleats. This is how you make your pleats in your fabric that will open up to fit around the face. We're going to open that fabric up like so, and you see these nice creases? Those serve as your pleat lines. I'm going to grab the pins here. You can measure these if you want. Like I said, any good quilter recognizes 1/4 of an inch from 50 yards away. So we're going to pleat this about 1/4 of an inch. See what I'm doing here? I'm just pinching the edges about 1/4 of an inch, and we're going to fold it up like so. Just kind of finger press it across. You want to make it fairly even on each side because you want your sides, these 2 sides are going to come together. You want them to be pretty even. And we're going to pin these pleats in like so. Do the same thing on the bottom pleat. Finger press it in, pin your pleat, turn your fabric over, and pin your pleat on the other side. Now I will check mine just to be sure. Just kind of measure it very quickly. There's that one edge. It's almost 5 inches. Here's my other edge. It's right at 5 inches, so we're good to go. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine. You see where these pins are? We're going to top stitch. See our rolled hem? We're going to top stitch that rolled hem. Rolled hem, sorry. I'm a musician. Can you tell? It's not a hem, it's a hem. But we're going to top stitch that rolled hem, and that's going to make our pocket. And our pleats. So here we go. You're going to do, you can turn it over this way so you know that you're catching. I'll do it both ways so you see. You can turn it over this way so that you know you're catching the edge of your rolled hem. I like to work with a stylus just because it helps me to get the fabric under there. Remember again to back stitch at the beginning and the end of each seam. Get my needle in the right position. There we go. Okay, so remember, as I said, always remember to backstitch at the beginning and the end of each seam. Now on this side, I'm going to do it on the other side. I'm going to do it on the right side. But because we've got 1/4 of an inch turned under, we're going to catch it. I'm just going to show you that you can do it either way and get the same results. Now, as you see, I did one side on the wrong side of the fabric. I'm just snipping my threads here. I did this one on the wrong side of the fabric. I did this one on the right side of the fabric. As you see, you get exactly the same results. Doesn't matter which way you do it. So, now we're going to take the pins out of our fabric. And we have pleats. Okay, going to take it back to the ironing board. And I'm actually going to press those pleats in nice and firm all the way across. Like so. Now we're going to make our pocket. Take it back to the sewing table. We're going to make our pocket. This pocket right here, that is for the added layer of protection. We're going to fold our piece in half, short edge to short edge, wrong side to wrong side. And we're going to match our pleats, you see? We're matching our pleats. And we're going to pin right there in the pleats. Okay, now I'm going to come over here to the folded edge. You see these pleats are nice and pressed in there, but that's my folded edge. I'm going to pin that. And I'm going to top stitch that. It'll hold the pleats. You see, this is one side of the mask, other side of the mask. I'm going to top stitch my pleats right here with a 1/4 inch seam once again. Back stitch. Clip your threads. And there you have your mask. You have your mask with the pleats, and you're going to have a pocket right here once we put the binding on. Next step, we're going to put the binding on. You see how the pleats are folded up? This is the top of your mask. This is the bottom of your mask. Your pleats will fold upward. So we're going to do the bottom of our mask first. We're going to take a piece of the binding, and you see we have the folded edge that we pressed, and we have the raw edge. We're going to put the raw edge of our binding to the raw edge of our mask. And we're just going to kind of eyeball the center. Since I have 3 pieces, it's pretty easy to do that. Just kind of eyeball the center and center it on your mask, like so. And we're going to pin that in. Now we're going to stitch that seam from one end of the mask to the other end of the mask. Remember to backstitch at the beginning and the end. This is enclosing your raw edge and forming your pocket. With a 1/4 inch seam, once again, backstitch. And backstitch again. Okay, now rip your threads. I know I can use the machine to do that, but I just use scissors. I'm going to take these pins out. Leave these pins in. We're going to take these pins out. I'm going to go to the ironing board. And you see the binding is sewn here. Here's my seam. I'm going to turn this binding up over that seam, making sure to keep my pressed edge secure. I don't want to iron my pressed edge out of my binding. All right. Now, back to the sewing table. You run around a lot. Now, we're going to take this folded edge. You see what that looks like? Here's my seam that stitched it to the mask. Here's my pressed edge of my binding. We're going to turn that pressed edge right down over that seam, like so. You see? Turn it right down over the seam, and I'm going to pin it. Now we're going to make our binding and the tie. Here's what you're going to do. You see up here at the top, you've got a raw edge. You're going to open your binding, open your pressed edge, and you're going to turn under. Wait a minute, I'm going to clip that little string off. You're going to turn under, I don't know, 1 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/4, whatever. Turn in a portion of it. And you're going to fold it back like so. Now, you're going to take the other side. You're going to fold it in to meet that in the middle. You see what I did there? I folded it in to meet it in the middle. Like so. And then, I'm going to fold this over into a sandwich. I just folded it over into a sandwich so that I caught all the raw edges inside. Now I'm going to stitch this, and when I stitch it, I'm going to keep my stitching as close to this open edge as possible, like not even 1/8 of an inch, so that I make sure that I catch both sides of this. Remember, once again, to always backstitch at the beginning and the end. You see what it looks like here? As I go, I'm just going to fold this over to meet in the middle, and then I'm going to fold it over and make my sandwich all the way down. I'm going to back stitch. You may have to push that through a little bit. Sometimes I use my stylus because if you're right on the tip end of that binding, sometimes it gets caught in the machine. So we're going to continue to fold that all the way down. And you see where my needle is? Let me get to a lighter fabric so you can see it better. All right, you see where my needle is? It's right at the very edge of this binding. When you get to the seam, this is why we press the seam open, so that you've got a nice open seam there and it's not nearly as many layers of fabric for either you to fold or your needle to go through. And as you get to the mask, you see this seam back here? It will turn that binding under for you. Just make sure you catch both edges as you stitch onto the mask. Continue stitching onto your mask, removing your pins as you go. Stitch nice and close to the edge, the folded edge of your binding. Now we're about to come off the edge of the mask here. Once again, fold and make your sandwich. And continue sewing right off the edge of the mask, like so. Once again, folding and making the sandwich. As we get closer to the end of the fabric, we're going to stop and we're going to do exactly what we did on the other edge, on the other end of the fabric. We're going to unfold, turn in, and fold it back. And fold it in again to meet in the middle. As you see, make your sandwich. And you're going to stitch right up to the edge of this, once again back stitching at the end. Clip your threads. You see what happened here? We have enclosed that raw edge, the bottom raw edge of your mask, in the binding, and we've made the ties. Now we're going to do the same thing with the top, except we're going to add our adjustable nose piece for the top of the mask. I am using pipe cleaners for my adjustable nose piece. If you cut a pipe cleaner in half, you get about 6 inches of pipe cleaner. You're going to have these sharp little wires on the end of it. You want to turn those under, because if you don't, they're going to stick through your fabric and they're going to stick whoever's wearing the mask. So I simply turn under the very edge of it and kind of crimp it like so. That way it doesn't have that sharp edge to poke through the fabric. You can also use twisty ties. However, they're not really as moldable as the pipe cleaners, and they're more difficult to put into your mask. So if that's all you have, you can use it, but nonetheless. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take our other piece of binding, once again, raw edge to raw edge. We're going to eyeball it and center it over our mask and pin it. And we're going to stitch that on just like we did the bottom, from the end of the mask to the end of the mask with a 1/4 inch seam, back stitching at the very beginning and the very end of that seam. Clip my threads over here. Take my pins out. Now, here's how we get the nose piece in. You can do it in several ways. I'm doing the one I prefer. You can simply lay it there, fold your binding over, and then top stitch at the end of at each end of your nose piece so that it can't move. I'm doing the way I prefer. You see this seam allowance here? You see where my stitching is? And I've got a 1/4 inch seam allowance right there. I'm going to center my nose piece over that seam allowance, like so. See? Stitching, raw edge of the fabric, and there's my pipe cleaner. And I'm simply going to zigzag over that. Just a little zigzag stitch. I'm not going inside my stitching. I'm zigzagging right in the seam allowance. And you don't have to do end to end. You can just do the majority of it. It's not going to go anywhere. And I zigzag over that pipe cleaner, keeping it right in my seam allowance, like so. Now you see that zigzag stitch on the back? That pipe cleaner is going nowhere. It is zigzagged in there. It will stay. Clip your threads. Once again, you go to the ironing board. Works better if you do it the other way. And you fold that binding out, just like we did before, and press up, right up over your pipe cleaner, or your piece of molding, whatever you're using. Now, back to the sewing table. We're going to turn this seam allowance. You see there's our folded edge of the fabric. We're going to turn it down, just like we did at the top, right down over that pipe cleaner. And we're going to pin it, just like we did at the top. It's going to be a little tighter fit this time, because you've got the pipe cleaner in there. All right, pinned. Once again, the end of the binding, turn it down, fold it over, fold this over to meet it in the middle, and make your sandwich, like so. Start right there, back stitch, remember to back stitch, and take your sewing machine off the zigzag. Making our binding once again, and our tie. Right up the very outside edge of that binding, folding it over to meet in the middle, and make a sandwich. One thing about working with quilter's cotton, you have lots of little strings, which is why we have to be so careful to encase every raw edge so that they can be washed without fraying. Stitching right up onto the mask as we did before. And removing the pins as we go. And as we're going down off the edge of the mask, we want to make sure we've got our binding folded and sandwiched again. Sometimes you have to work that seam in there, like so, because there are so many layers of fabric. Once again, as you get to the end of your tie, you're going to fold in, fold to the middle, and make your sandwich, and then stitch to the end and back stitch. Clip your little threads. Now we're going to remove all of our pins that are still in here holding our pleats down. And voila, you have a mask. As you see, your binding and your tie have enclosed the edges and made your pocket. You've got your adjustable nose piece up here in your binding, and you've got your pleats that form to the face. This is, as I said, washable, dryable. They can be sanitized, sprayed with Lysol, whatever, molded to the nose, tied around your head and around your neck. Good to go. 100% quilter's cotton. Safe and effective, with the pocket for the added protection and the nose piece. Happy sewing. Do something for your community today. Your hospitals, your doctor's offices, your clinics are begging for these. Happy sewing. God bless America.